Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for tuning in to the broadcast featuring tech and service delivery in government. Please feel free to introduce yourselves on the chat with your name and where in the world you're joining from. Just a little bit about me before we kick off this amazing session. My name is Anshu Gupta. I'm a senior advisor, chief of staff at the United States Digital Service in the Executive Office of the President. And I'm really excited to be here because I also came from tech to government and have absolutely loved my short time here so far. And I'm really excited to have this opportunity and moderate this session today. So, products and services look different in government, but many aspects are the same. Today, you'll see how technologists in government design products and services for the public, plus, their agencies are hiring in their own booths today. So, be sure to visit them right after this and hear more about the opportunities related to the projects that everyone shares. Today, we have fantastic speakers lined up to show you some real initiatives that you might work on when you join their agencies. So we'll see demos today in the following order. First, we'll hear from Julie Waters, Senior Technical Advisor for Data and Analytics at FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. And then we will see Josiah, Chief Data and AI Officer for the state of Vermont. And we're going to save questions till the end. So please post your questions in the chat and we will make a list of them and get to them at the end. But to kick things off, first, I'm going to introduce Chris Kraft, who was recently named Deputy Chief Technology Officer for AI and Emerging Technology at the Department of Homeland Security. Chris was formerly Assistant Administrator for Financial Systems at FEMA, and before starting his first stint at FEMA in July 2018, Chris served as a project manager in the Department of Interior's Business Center. He also served as Assistant Director for Financial Systems at the Department of Justice's Executive Office for U.S. Attorneys. Wow, Chris, this is super impressive. Chris also held leadership roles within industry, including Vice President of Corporate Solutions at Sirius XM Radio, Senior Consultant at Bearing Point, and Senior Director of Business Processes and Systems at K-12. Let's hear some words from him about DHS and the AI work they are doing. Take it away, Chris.
Thank you, Anshu, and great to be here and great to talk to all of you. And as Anshu was mentioning on my background, I started in the private sector, and I actually did not anticipate going into the federal sector. And it's been an amazing opportunity to be part of the missions of multiple organizations, and I love it. And I think there's so much opportunity for us, especially now with artificial intelligence and an opportunity for people coming from the private sector into the federal sector. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're doing at DHS with artificial intelligence. DHS, I think, is really leading the way in a number of areas with artificial intelligence. With commercial generative AI, we have opened that up across our department for people to use. We've put guidance in place and training and rules of behavior. And I think that's really a great way to get people leveraging the technology, comfortable with the technology. We recently put out our AI roadmap. The AI roadmap has our lines of effort and what we're doing at DHS. And it also has 3 of our DHS generative AI pilots. Those pilots are with different components. And Julie will probably talk a little bit about what they're doing at FEMA to help with hazard mitigation. We also have a pilot at USCIS to help with officers training to interact with asylum seekers and use that capability as one way to train the officers. So I think it's really an interesting and exciting use case. And then there's also a pilot with HSI, and that is focused on helping with investigations to cut down on the trafficking of fentanyl. So another use case that is focused in a different area. All 3 are diverse, so we can get a lot of lessons learned on how to move forward with generative AI. But what we're really excited about and a focus of today's event is the hiring that we're doing for our DHS AI Corps. This AI core was stood up earlier this year, and we're going to be bringing on 50 AI experts, all GS-15 remote positions, to help across the department. This is going to be modeled after the U.S. Digital Service and is going to give us the ability to have cross-functional teams that can be assigned to projects across the department, whether it's to help U.S. Coast Guard or FEMA. So just to step back, DHS is 260,000 employees, 22 organizations, 8 operational components with diverse mission sets. I mentioned Coast Guard, FEMA, Secret Service, and a wide range of mission sets. So the DHS AI Core can be used to go and help those components work on high-profile projects and structured like the U.S. Digital Service. So it's really going to help DHS continue to evolve and deliver leading-edge artificial intelligence solutions. And this is where we need experts like many of you to help us and come join our team. An exciting opportunity to be in an organization that's really leaning forward, where we need your expertise, we need your help, and we need and we're building something that's new and innovative, and really think it's a great opportunity to join the federal workforce. So with that, I want to turn it back over to Anshu and jump into the demonstrations. I think we've got a great one that Julie's going to walk us through.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Chris. That was wonderful. Now, I'm thrilled to introduce our first demo presenter. Dr. Julie Waters serves as Technical Advisor for Data and Analytics at the Office of Policy and Program Analysis at FEMA. In this role, she provides expert technical advice to agency leadership for FEMA's data and analytics modernization and sustainment efforts, including an executive oversight of a multi-year effort to develop a modern cloud-based data platform called the FEMA Data Exchange, also known as FEMA DEX. Through her work, Dr. Waters champions the use of data as a strategic asset in support of FEMA's mission to help people before, during, and after disasters. At DHS headquarters, she led data analytics projects and teams spanning the field risk analysis, national preparedness, and biosurveillance, with a common theme of integrating data and analysis from multiple sources and methods to inform public policy, strategy, and budgetary decisions. And we all know how hard that is, so that's amazing. In addition to her federal service, Dr. Waters led strategy and business operations for a large global consulting firm's investment program in digital and artificial intelligence solutions. Take it away, Dr. Waters.
All right, thanks, Anshu, for that great introduction. And let me share my screen. All right, is that coming through okay?
Yes, we can see it.
Perfect. Well, thanks again, and I'm really excited to be here today to talk to you about FEMA's important mission and how we're using data and AI. I'm also really excited to be here representing the Department of Homeland Security. I think, as Anshu mentioned, I first joined the department back in 2009 as my first real job after finishing my doctorate, kind of a bright, shiny new human, because I wanted to serve my country and make a difference. And I think, as mentioned, I'm also someone who left for private sector for a couple of years, and then I came back to FEMA. And why did I come back? I missed FEMA's mission. So FEMA has a fantastic mission, and I guess because I'm here presenting, I can say I think it's the best mission in federal government. Those others might disagree. We get to help people before, during, and after disasters, often on some of the worst days of someone's life. As an agency, we are facing increasingly more frequent, severe, and complex disasters, often in places that are not prepared for them. Just this year, we responded to a hurricane in the desert in Southern California. We responded to a wildfire on a tropical island, which is actually pictured here. It's some of the damage after the fires out in Hawaii last fall. And also the hottest month of July ever recorded just last year. I know our next speaker from Vermont, there's been significant flooding in Vermont in the past year or two, which is above and beyond what they previously experienced and they tried to mitigate against. So we're seeing this more and more, more growth, more cost, more impact to the country. When I talk about FEMA, I like to highlight the breadth of our mission, because you might only know about FEMA from what you see on TV during disasters, during disaster response, and we coordinate that very closely with many other federal, state, local governments and agencies. But to help people before disasters, just in the last year, we dedicated nearly $3 billion to fund critical resilient infrastructure and flood mitigation projects to help build climate resilience around the nation. We also responded to over 100 disasters last year. To help people after those disasters, we provided $1.3 billion in direct assistance to disaster survivors and nearly $12 billion toward rebuilding the roads, public buildings, and infrastructure damaged by those disasters. So as I kind of mentioned, the field of emergency management is at a pivotal moment. These numbers keep going up year over year. And we at FEMA no longer have a disaster season. We used to kind of just have hurricane season, but now this tempo has put us in a year-long posture that's put a significant strain on our people and our resources. So to meet this challenge, we're committed to try to leverage every possible solution we have available, including AI and other emerging tech, to reduce barriers to our program delivery, to help us prepare for emerging threats, and to improve our national readiness and resilience. So here are just a few of the ways that AI is being utilized at FEMA. And I would say we're still in the early part of our journey. My day job outside of talking about AI is actually working on our data foundation, which I think as you all know, is so pivotal to making AI possible. And so this is just a sample, and we're continuing to grow. But the first in the upper left is actually an example from the atmospheric rivers that California experienced about a year ago, and actually experienced again just this past February. So we have regional data analytics teams, and this particular one based out of our Oakland office used flood inundation modeling before the event, and then satellite radar data of the floodwaters immediately after the event to predict the impacts to households. So this kind of analysis helps us to pre-position our resources and then expedite things like disaster declaration decisions, which ultimately are decided by the president. The second example in the lower left is from 2022. So that year, Hurricane Ian, its path took it over a very broad swath of Florida, kind of came up near Tampa Bay and all the way across the peninsula. And it became clear that our traditional approach of manually conducting what we call geospatial damage assessments was not going to be possible. And when we say manual, it means like looking at pictures, human one at a time. So our response team deployed a computer vision model that narrowed the number of structures needing that human review from over 1 million images or structures to just 77,000. So that shortened the time to complete these initial damage assessments from weeks to days. And that type of automation, which we want to do more and more of, helped identify areas that had the worst amount of damage, prioritize our operations and where we're sending resources, and again, ultimately help survivors faster. Another example of kind of more bread and butter machine learning types of approaches is what we call our responder workload and staffing forecasts. So for this, we want to forecast the number of individuals and households registering for disaster assistance over time, which is critical to make sure we're adequately staffing our call centers to support disaster survivors. And again, this is, if you think about, we have a website called disasterassistance.gov, which we've been working to streamline, but also a lot of survivors often call in, especially when they first contact us. And so this is a surge model, right? We don't need to always have that staff with a high level of staff 24/7. We have surge. And how do we make sure that we're predicting the amount of people when they need to be there and for how long? And then finally in the lower right, something that actually our previous speaker, Kraft, was very instrumental in doing while he was at FEMA. We're starting to use generative AI for internal use cases, such as, in this case, being more efficient in how we do some of the information gathering, synthesis, and reporting for financial questions. This is a very federal thing, but every year we build a budget, we do a very big budget rollout, we get a lot of questions from congressional stakeholders on our budget. There's a pretty large burden internally on the team to generate answers to those questions. And this helps us just quickly generate initial response that can be vetted by subject matter experts and reduce a lot of the staff time and churn to do that. And so that is actually our first generative AI solution in production at FEMA. And we just recently rolled it out a month or two ago, which is really exciting. Jumping into, so now I want to kind of pivot a little bit. I've given you an overview of just how our agency is using AI and technology to advance our mission, we need people with a pretty broad range of skills. Data scientists and ML engineers, data engineers, software and DevOps engineers to help us scale all of this, but also human-centered designers, product managers, pretty broad set of folks to make AI and technology possible. So as I pivot into this slide and the next few slides, I'm going to do more of a deep dive from a customer perspective into one of the pilots that Chris mentioned that DHS is sponsoring. To talk to you kind of from a user persona as the person who might be using this technology for an area that does have broad impact but might not be as well known, our grants programs and hazard mitigation specifically. Just talk about how we think AI could be a game changer, just to spark some very specific use case and some thinking here. So forget that I'm Julie from FEMA. Now I'm Julie from your local county. I work for your local government, and I'm a county planner, and I want to make my community more resilient. One way I do that is thinking through how to get funding for my community to invest in projects that make things more resilient and buy down risk. And I want to figure out how to go get FEMA grant money. One of the things I need to do, this picture here of the mountain shows some of those planning steps. I need to do some planning, and I need to come up with an approved hazard mitigation plan. It's actually, I believe, a statutory and regulatory requirement that a local community or jurisdiction has what we call an approved hazard mitigation plan that's approved by FEMA in order to be eligible for grant funding. That's true at the state level and also at the local and tribal level as well. And so these are things that actually have to be updated every 5 years. And they talk about the risks, some of the changes in the community around growth and land use, how we might mitigate. I'll get into this a bit more. But this is a big lift, and that's kind of just the precursor step to even figuring out what projects we want to do, figuring out how to get those investments, and ultimately, again, helping our community be more resilient. And so, I mentioned using some FEMA grant programs. Just, again, this is perhaps not something is popular in the news. Some of the ways FEMA grants help communities, whether it's flood mitigation and helping raise flood walls or other flood protective measures, to elevating housing, to doing building retrofits to help with earthquake damages, to even things like in the Pacific Northwest and other places, building tsunami evacuation towers so people can go and have a place to be safe, or even things like road elevation and thinking about wildlife and environmental protection, salmon restoration. So a really wide range of options. Jumping into the next slide here, what does it mean? What do I have to do to make a plan? And this is sort of where we started thinking about the potential power of generative AI. We're the government, we like to help. We have a lot of very long documents. We have very long policy documents, regulatory documents, guidance documents. We have a website full of best practices with like dozens of examples. All of these documents that are on the left side of the slide are like dozens or hundreds of pages long. And if you are a small, think about where you might live or where you might have grown up. I grew up in a really small community, actually a population of about 800. I think the total county population was in the tens of thousands at most. So these are folks who probably have many other jobs. They're probably dual-hatted. They might also be the town clerk in addition to being the county planner. And people don't have time necessarily to go through all the regulations and do the best job without probably paying someone else to do it for them, but they might not have money. So then they might not have a plan, right? And so, they go through all this, they do the guidance, they have to then assess their hazards and risks, which usually requires a lot of both qualitative and quantitative data about how frequently they've seen disasters, how that might change over time. The really important part of this planning process and what we want to actually have happen more so than a document is the community engagement around what do we care about mitigating in our community? What risks do we want to buy down? How do we protect our most vulnerable populations? How do we have an inclusive planning process? In talking and learning, I'm not a mitigation planner or a community planner, but when you talk to that group of people, they care about the people. The planning process for them is about people, but it often gets bogged down by all of the paperwork and all of the compliance part of the process. The ultimate goal is to generate a plan. And so for large communities and well-resourced communities, these can be very large. The Northern Virginia Hazard Mitigation Plan is 2,400 pages long. The other one here shown in the picture, I think County of San Francisco, is around 300 pages long. So it's a lot of words and documentation. And so what we're looking to do is to understand how we can use generative AI to make this more efficient, while not, and really importantly, not just having a planned generative AI as a check the box exercise that goes on a shelf and no one ever uses. We're looking to understand how can we use generative AI to streamline and help with the parts of the process that make sense, the information gathering, summarization, boilerplate content generation, as well as potentially like templates and best practices for community engagement, to allow communities to both have more time and do better community engagement to get better quality plans at the end of the day. So we're still in the very early stages of this project, and to be really honest with you, we're kind of still figuring this out. There are a lot of technical questions around, what deployment model for this would work, given how much data might be localized versus nationalized, what level of knowledge base, if we're using something like retrieval augmented generation, how many documents, how good do those documents have to be, how do we kind of chunk them up for vector search? Like, we're working through all the different angles. And as you might imagine, we're really exploring, everyone, this audience is probably very comfortable with AI. Not everybody is. And so as we're socializing this and working with local communities, there's also a lot of education that we're doing. And we're learning a lot from that process and dialogue with communities who are our key stakeholders. So I believe that is the end of my presentation, but I will be around to answer any questions. And thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to be here today.
Thank you so much. That was incredible. I have worked with FEMA in the past, but actually did not know about the breadth of the mission and so much of the preventative work that goes into it and all the coordination. So it was really incredible. So thank you again. Now I'm excited to introduce our next presenter, Josiah. And I talked about briefly, but just to recap, I'm so sorry. Let me get my notes. I just wanted to say that Josiah is joining us from the state of Vermont as a Chief Data and AI Officer. We're so excited to have you here, and take it away.
All right, thanks so much. This was a lot of fun, and really enjoyed that last presentation. As Julie said, we suffered some pretty significant flooding here in Vermont over the last year or so, and I was on the team that was working with FEMA and responding to that, and it's exciting to see how much work is going into that process and making that even more accessible to people who are impacted. I think as everyone else has said, like, what's great about working for government is that you can't beat the mission. You get to solve meaningful problems. You get to help people, you get to do cool stuff to help people, in our case in Vermont. So I wanted to just give you some examples of that and of how we're approaching AI and data here in Vermont in order to enable all the government's missions to be more successful. So here in Vermont, we're taking an approach to AI that's centered around thoughtful adoption. So we were among the first states to tell our employees, yes, go use generative AI, and kind of embraced the use of that for personal productivity. And we saw that as an opportunity to help our workforce be ready to work in a shared responsibility model where they're not using IT systems that are kind of just data repositories, but they're using systems interactively where the systems are actually helping them to make decisions. And there's a whole set of new paradigms about how work gets done in that type of an environment, and new sets of things to look out for, new failure modes. And so we really saw that as a training opportunity for our staff. We're using the metaphor here in Vermont of AI as power tools for information workers. And in the same way that you wouldn't have a robotic nail gun go build your house, you want a tool that's in the hands of someone who's skilled to do the work, that makes the work that makes them more effective and have a better experience doing their job. So To enable that, we put out a code of ethics. It landed just before ChatGPT came out a bit over a year ago. And we got to see how our thoughts about AI ethics and where it would be applied navigated that kind of sea change, where the conversation shifted from talking about machine learning to really about generative AI, and whether our ethical principles still applied, and they did. We found that the approach that we were taking around autonomy and responsibility and explainability were all still just as relevant in the age of generative AI. And if you want to see any of that work, it's on the Agency of Digital Services for Vermont website. Yeah, there's a lot there. You can check it out. The other thing that Vermont did to lead in this space was we put together a director of artificial intelligence position who was focused, like senior level IT position, focused on how to bring AI and use it in Vermont effectively. And then recently we combined our data and AI offices because we see data readiness as the real important core of doing AI really well and scaling from individual pilots to effective use cases. So as we think about applying AI, we're looking at making it easier for Vermonters to interact with their government. We've talked with a number of other states and a lot of Vermonters about how they spend way more time researching how to engage with government than actually getting the services that they're requesting. And that becomes kind of an invisible tax on Vermonters. The other way I like to say it is that the day you have to interact with government shouldn't be the worst day of your week. So often when we think about interacting with government, we think about going and sitting at DMV or maybe using a clunky website. And that's not the future we want. It is too often indicative of our present, though. And so we're working on making that better, both through practices like product ownership and user experience design, and also using AI. The other place we're looking at AI usage internally is to make work more creative and meaningful for state employees. And I'll get to some examples of that in a minute. But when I'm talking with our workforce and people have concerns about AI and job replacement and things like that, the conversation that I try to have with them is really about what's the work you do that's repetitive and not creative. Let's look at getting rid of those kind of worst parts of your job and offloading those to a robot and freeing you up to do the value add work. And we did some pilots here in the state with like report generation. We have to send lots of reports over to the State House, and one of those is a 100-page or so report on IT projects that are in flight. And this year, we enabled our project managers to use a private instance of ChatGPT to do that work. And when I followed up with our director of project management afterwards, I asked her, how did it go? How much time did it save? And she was like, oh, it saved us several hours. And I thought, several hours on a 100-page document is not the outcome I was hoping for. But the follow-up was they finally were able to do it to the level of quality they always wanted to. And I think as governments, one of the things that we face is kind of a limited pool of workforce to accomplish an ever increasing volume of work. And we see AI as the way to help us keep up with that and to focus our employees on the things that they love to do, the missions that they're good at, less time keying data into systems, more time doing creative work. So I want to just talk about like some of the specific projects we've worked on this week in my team to give you a sense of what it's like to work in a state. And I think what's really fun about working in a state with fully centralized IT like Vermont has is that we support all the missions. So we have law enforcement, we have human services, we have natural resources. We get to work on all of these things and interact with federal partners and interact with other states and with constituents. So this week, the biggest thing that we worked on was our data privacy law that is currently working its way through Vermont's legislature. And our leading work on AI and data has actually positioned us so that we were able to come to our legislature and say, we can help with the ongoing development and implementation of the new data privacy law. And our legislature was really excited about that and happy to engage with us and the Attorney General on figuring out what data privacy will look like in Vermont in the future. We worked with our Office of Racial Equity on designing a system, not like an IT system, but the people, the process, the tech, to monitor our government processes for systemic bias and find systemic ways of fixing those problems. And so I think that's really exciting and meaningful work that helps the most vulnerable Vermonters interact with government better. We also worked on projects with law enforcement around detecting signals and patterns in all of the calls for service that come in to both state and local law enforcement agencies. So that's some intelligence gathering work and a lot of pattern recognition. It's just traditional data analytics, but it's been a game changer for our state and local law enforcement agencies to see patterns across jurisdictional lines where the same group of people or the same person might be interacting with both state and local law enforcement, and to be able to look at those types of patterns and collaborate with our human services agency to provide services to folks who may be spiraling or in a crisis. AI projects, we got to work on a pilot with our Department of Liquor and Lottery. In Vermont, it is not allowed to sell certain types of alcohol and tobacco products online. And so their compliance officers spend a lot of time Googling and finding places that are not in compliance with our laws, and then sending them notices saying, you can't do this, you can't ship to Vermont. And so one of the projects they asked us to work on was, can we use AI to help filter down the breadth and volume of the projects that they're, of the sites that they're looking at, and kind of help with that discovery. Use AI to kind of, again, automate that repetitive, boring part of their job so that they can focus on interactions and education with business owners. We worked with the Agency of Transportation here in Vermont to build a solution that will help them to more quickly respond to complex questions that Vermonters ask. Things like, why is the speed limit past my house got lowered to 45? Why was that? And should it be 35 or should it be 55? And those types of questions seem, they're very easy to ask and they're very complicated to answer because it has to do with road geometry and crashes and things like that. And so the transportation folks were spending usually over an hour doing background research in order to answer these relatively simple questions. And so we're using generative AI to produce first drafts of those answers, to summarize all the relevant data, hand that back to the transportation folks, and then they will edit that and tailor it to the particular question and hand that off to Vermonters. We're also, we have an AI council here in Vermont, so we're working with them on oversight of how AI is implemented throughout the state, and also building out guidance for how it will be how it will be used in the future. I worked with my project management group on developing a vision for product ownership and thinking about our Agency of Natural Resources has a grants platform that they use to interact with Vermonters who want to do improvements to wetlands on their land and things like that. And so developing a vision of having a technologist who is the owner of that platform and could help to design it and help to move it forward into future iterations and incorporate new technologies and improve user experience. So those are all things we worked on this week. And that's not really an unusual week, right? My team, being a small state, we get to work on projects with every agency that impact Vermonters and how they do business with the state every day. And that's really cool and really exciting. And that's what I love about our mission. So talk to other states too. They also are doing cool things, maybe not quite as cool as Vermont, but would love to talk more about any of those if people have questions about any of those projects, or hear more about how Vermont's approaching AI. Thanks.
Thank you so much for that. I learned a lot. First of all, I think we all wrote down power tools for information workers. So that is a phrase that I will keep and cherish for a while. And I just really resonated with the power of impact for working in government. I know that's why I came, and there's just such interesting problems to solve at a scale that's unlike anything else. And so loved hearing from you and your examples. And all of the customer centric work at your agency. I really appreciated it. Well, thank you again. We have some questions rolling in. So if our speakers could come off and come on video, I'm going to ask some questions that we've been getting from the audience. All right. So the first question, it's not directed at anyone, but the first question is, what is the Fed's approach to responsible AI for the work that each agency is doing? And Chris, Julie, Josiah, does anyone want to take, I guess it's the Fed, so maybe Chris or Julie, do you guys want to take the first stab at that?
I can jump in and then I'll turn over to Julie and she can add some context. But I think it's amazing how much focus that across the federal government we are putting on responsible use of the technology and the work that's happening to ensure that that's baked into everything that we're doing, whether it's from the civil rights and the civil liberties or other aspects of responsible use. It's really amazing. If you look at the DHS AI roadmap, you can see responsible use incorporated in many different places in many different ways. So I don't know, Julie, if you have anything else to add.
Yeah, Chris, you hit on a lot of it. I mean, responsible use to us means, I think, not just some of the more technical testing and evaluation that many of you are probably familiar with around like the performance, how well that tracks over time, but also the civil rights, the privacy, the whether there's any bias or equity related issues. And we have a really important role in that because, the decisions that we make in the federal government impact folks' lives, and we want to make sure that's done fairly. And I think, thinking about fairness, respect, integrity. And so we're looking at it not necessarily just from the model perspective, but also the underlying data. Like, do the data support? Are the underlying data complete? Are they biased? Are they flawed? All the way to how does the model behave? How does it interact in the real world? And the administration is really leaning forward on this. And for certain types of use cases, whether they're particularly safety impacting or rights impacting, there's a lot more restrictions and compliance and governance being put in place to make sure that we're being responsible. So yeah, I would emphasize both the human aspects, the bias, the civil rights and liberties aspect, as well as the technical performance to make sure that we're getting good outputs from the models.
I would add on to that two more things, which is tracking outcomes, right? NIST put this out in their framework, but tracking what are the actual outcomes downstream of the AI system, and are those what we expected? And then the last one that we're working on here in Vermont is explainability, and coming up with kind of a nutrition facts like label that can be put on the bottom of robot made decisions, so that it's clear to people how that decision was arrived at, and that it was fair, and that there's a way to appeal if you think it was unfair.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think it's definitely an ongoing thing that we all think about, and it's constantly evolving, but I know it's top of mind for all of us in the work that we do. This next question is for Julie, but I actually think that Chris and Josiah might add a couple things after Julie takes the first go at it. So Julie, thank you so much for sharing. I've written mitigation plans for rural communities in the past and can attest they are very difficult to create when you have limited funds and expertise. I think AI is a great tool to build out mitigation plans for gathering probability and risk impacts, low probability of happening versus high impact if it does. How do you get community engagement and buy-in to get these ideas implemented?
No, it's a really great question. And we're working through our regional offices. FEMA has, like many government agencies, regional offices across the country who are kind of our first line of contact with our communities, and then going through the states, et cetera. We've been, just starting to do some initial outreach and, get a mix of reactions. But for example, it's not public yet, but one county in New Jersey, for example, has already signed up and actually ratified it at a county meeting that they will participate, and they're excited to participate. And so I think we're kind of still from a product management perspective, still in the exploratory stage of, we have this idea and we're validating it with users such as communities. So far, we've actually had a pretty decent level of interest, and we're kind of refining our approach to taking that back and how to engage with them. So I don't know if I'm fully answering your question, but I think, as I mentioned, one of the key things is like the educational piece. In addition to the technology, we're looking at training, tips and tricks, like prompt engineering, how to help them use just AI in general as part of our outreach, as well as some of the things we mentioned around explainable use, hallucinations, that type of stuff. So we're kind of learning from them as we go, to be really honest.
I guess to chime in there, one other thing to think about is how you're preparing the groundwork before you have a particular use case, either that you want to bring to someone or that they're bringing to you. Thinking about helping them to be ready to use whatever the tool is, and also understanding their needs enough that you can articulate how the thing is going to help them. And that's been really key to getting engagement with our tools. And I think this also got to work on some mitigation plans in the wake of our recent floods. And it's a lot of work. And you know what? If there's a robot that will help me do some of the groundwork of that, I'm all in. You can sign me right up, Julie.
Yeah, and I think I'll just add on to what Julie mentioned. I love this generative AI pilot because we're getting people engaged that are outside of the organization and leveraging the power of generative AI. And then Julie mentioned one of the solutions that I helped build when I was at FEMA, and I think it was amazing, this generative AI solution, to interact with people that were using it and to getting their feedback and what they were trying to do and what worked well in the model, and then continuing to iterate. It's just it's a great partnership and learning along as we were developing the solution.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Just looking at the time now, I really wanted to just say thank you to 3 of our extraordinary panelists here who've shared so much about the different use cases. And I've learned so much, and hopefully all the attendees have as well. And thank you to those who joined the session. The next broadcast will start at 2:15 p.m. EST. And will feature technologists who have recently transitioned into government from the private sector. I hope to see you there, and have a great day. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you again to our panelists.
Thank you.